We can start with the mechanics from a simple point. Whenever water flows, it has certain attributes inherent to itself before we even get to the device. So when you flatten water out, everybody can watch this everywhere. If you pour it out of a wide enough cup, it's very obvious that the water, when it starts to flatten or become asymmetrical, and this asymmetrical relationship is expressed between hydrogen and oxygen. There's an asymmetry. You know, they're H2O, 2 protons versus 16 atomic units in the oxygen. So you have a huge weight or mass asymmetry, charge asymmetry going on there. So there is an asymmetrical charge present within the water. When you begin to pour it, it is that asymmetrical charge that causes the water from the right to flow to the left and the water from the left to flow to the right. So we get an X pattern out of the water. Now, if we just envision going over spheres with an X pattern, we start to see a grid or a torus or a flower of life pattern within the water that's visible. You can see the ripples, you know, in the water. When a river, when you hike down a river or a stream and it goes to a flat rock run, you see the water is flowing across itself in these ripples. It's tuned to itself to time, where this one's going over, well, this one's going under. And somehow it flows all together without any collisions. So there is a solid awareness between, you know, any water and water body. Also, when you watch a water flow around a rock, the water goes around the rock way before it ever even comes in contact with the rock. It doesn't run into the rock and then go around the rock. So you see water recognizing its environment ahead of time. So when the water enters this device, it's getting flattened out by going around the flow forms. And that's causing it to initiate its left-right asymmetry, which is the same thing you have to do with sound cancellation. So back to the previous, what are we doing with this when we bring it into water? We're canceling the noise and the disorder within the water to allow the life force energy to remanifest. Where it comes from, where it came from, how it got there is a rather large debate. But through these mechanics, we can see this. Also, if you take two spheres and put them side by side, you end up with the curvature shape. And this is the only shape in science that will break the sound barrier. If you don't have that shape of nozzle, you cannot break the sound barrier. So all supersonic jets have this as an exhaust exit. All vacuum generators have to use this shape to pull implosive or vacuous forces into the equation. So not only are you getting the left-right cancellation forces, which is similar to the same technology of Bose and sound cancellation and many others. Interferometry is the advanced scientific term that's used for it. You get low pressure zones mixed with high pressure zones repeatedly through the device. At the same time, you get a left and a right vortex going on. At certain times, if you pour through the device and the flow is not too high, a low amount of flow and the right amount of flow, you can actually see the water switching and rotating coming out of the device because it's not saturated. So if you fill the device up, the spin is so unified and so fast you can't see any spin going on. But you can play with the flow rates through any one of these units, in particular this one because it has a nozzle, and watch the water trying to turn to the right and trying to turn to the left because it hasn't built up its full, you know, the flattening out where the left-right asymmetry shows up, the cross flows occur, the noise is canceled. As far as the electrical insertion, it's actually a negative electricity or a capacitance, which water is, with the materials inside that are the next level of trigger to get this all to work correctly. And so that's how the noise is straightened out. The same energy is in there, it just becomes organized and now usable. And that life force energy was never really gone from the water. It was just hidden within the water and untappable, more or less. But it's always prone to be rectified and put back to work in certain ways. Consequently, the dead water will eat pipes, not carry minerals. It gets a complicated function there because structured water's trigger to carry when it's flowing is stronger. When it stops, i.e. a river dumping into a lake, its trigger with no motion is to settle. And different mechanics start to occur there, you know, with that situation. The surface tension is reduced because the internal stress of the water, so when I speak of entropy or disorder, that's stress within the water. So we take that stress away, and the tension in the water goes down. No different than a person. You know, person stress is under tension, same type terms. We take that away, and things start to flow. You know, you can heal better, you can move better, all these things. The same thing is going on within the water, you know, which begs the question of our connection with water. A very conscious connection, because we're 70s, parts of us are 90% of it, in the brain to 80, 70, it's 2/3 and up. And we are feeling what the water's feeling, and water flowing through a pipe, we are feeling that in a home. And I've never seen anybody to this day, people who have no subtle energy experience, no clairvoyance, nothing, don't believe in any of this stuff, take a pair of dowsing rods and they will trigger when water's flowing. Probably 50 for 50 on that with the most skeptics. So it's letting you know through a mechanism that this water is all resonant with each other. The tension going down is a de-stressing of it. There are other properties. Since water is a complicated element, and it is hard to get really pure water, you can get varied responses from it. But in general, the surface tension goes down about 5%. It doesn't show up in all situations. The simplest of instruments show it very consistently at 5%. It can be more, depending on what's in the water. It possibly could be less if the water's saturated with you know, minerals and atoms that aren't cohesive to amplifying things, and water would be in the function of carrying waste away at that point, you know, getting it out. And it's got one mission, is to get this waste out. It's not doing much else until it drops, you know, that out. But the surface tension change is a large one. Cardboard and absorption, often with distilled water, is a good way for people to play with the situation. And you know, often we have to run it through the device multiple times to get a visual effect. We have instruments that look at, you know, very detailed versions of it, and you also have interference from the environment. So metals tend to interfere because the water is in contact with them, so it's changing live accordingly. So even though it may come out reduced in tension, if there's a metal contact, it may hide the effect. You know, taking a syringe or a dropper and putting pieces on cardboard and just looking at them at eye level visual and how fast they absorb into the cardboard. Cardboard with no coating on it, it works just fine, and typically you'll see the structured water go down into the cardboard first and spread out within the cardboard. From the side view, you will also see that the droplet it does not have tucked edges. It will begin to lay out flatter. And that's an indirect way of the tension in the water is holding it upright. It's relaxing after it goes through the unit. Simple way of seeing that something else happens. Another method to look at changes in chemistry and reactions is, in particular with tap water with chlorine and fluoride in it, and it's probably chlorine. It doesn't really matter, but it shows the difference. You take unstructured water out of the tap and through the dynamic unit and look at the bubbles that form on a glass, and there's a huge difference in the amount of bubbles that are stuck to the wall and what is oxidizing or degassing out of the water, structured versus unstructured. That shows a difference. So I've talked to many people who are not sensitive and wasn't seeing results in the specific narrow way they were looking for it, and said, can you show me that something's going on here? And just simply observe the difference in the water, look, and that opening them up at that point that something different is going on here was enough for them to go on and later say that I'm so glad I did this. This has had wonderful health benefits for my clients, and so on and so forth. And there is a mind-water interaction, how strong it is between that, and we know all things. Positive attitude is all over, our society. So we know this is going on, and we know water has a response to it. Children's games where they can steer things with the mind, and water is very responsive to all that. Matter of fact, the mind itself is mostly water with electricity. We don't put it under a microscope because that's a top view. We take a side view through a microscope. It doesn't take very much power. And then a computer goes through an analytic of the shape of the water. At first, we were having trouble with it. It was a metal syringe and metal needle. So what we had to do was get the drop applied in the same situation. They hang the drop from a needle, and that was the problem is the metal, the water grounding to the metal. So once we got over that and used non-conductive materials and put a drop and take the side view with the camera, we see the similar thing that you can see with your visual eye. We just have a computer analyze it and data log it to make it more scientific, but it is totally seeable by the human eye. There are other things that you can see in certain situations and responses. Unfortunately, these are for the people who interact with water and systems and use it, and the grower of a crop, a small enough crop where he is very familiar with the trends and patterns. So they will see it in those ways and be very expressive about it. I know, every morning I water until the soil's dry when I come out the next morning if there's no rain. Given normal conditions, since I've been using this water, it's been damp in the morning with the same amount of water every morning. That I can tell you. And you need somebody very attentive to the system to see. We've used them on aerospace quench tanks in which cavitation would occur from curing molds, which makes water very aggressive because of the heat and the impulse and the pressure. And that was depositing things all over the tank walls, making weird colors, growing unsightly molds and things in the water that the operators were concerned with. We put a unit on one machine next to the other machine that had a common return back to the water system, say 300 to 500 feet, and it all gets pumped back around, through a chiller system. And most of the problems were completely eliminated on the cleaning cycle. I use caution here because the best water in the world doesn't allow for neglect, bad principle application and repeat of that principle. So there's no magic to overriding bad principle and neglect, which is a bad principle in itself and usually the main cause of these things. So there is a limitation to it, but over untreated water, what we saw was vastly different and preserving to the life of the machine. So this life force, goes on to things that are not even considered alive in the service life of things, the reduced labor of human beings that they find, less than appealing, cleaning tanks and scum off of tanks and biologics and things like that. Health benefits, first thing I think people will notice is their elimination system in the water form functions better. They may go through cycles and changes in there. Clear out of your kidney system, just the same as we see calcite buildup and transformation of calcite salts. It doesn't take anything away. It changes the form to where they're not destructive to the system, and they can work and be removed from the system rather than sticking to the system. And so if there's a continual version of this, no crystal can build up enough. So, reduction in kidney stones, better electrical functions of the body. Nothing very major. It's very subtle and holistic. If there's a problem going on and the problem was due to blockages or things like this, then you can see very responsive results. A normal healthy person will see a subtle improvement in a lot of things. Women tend to claim increased dreaming function. The pineal gland is known to build up calcites and fluorosilicic, acids in situations that block dream function. So it's interesting, there are the number of different ways people respond, but it all seems to has to do with harmful buildup, and clearing that buildup out of the body are the most predominant ones. There's, coupled with other treatments, it covers the moon as far as what's possible, from cancer remedies to but this being a part of a whole system, and it's involved in everything, all your body's functions and electricity. So it's the holistic value that's greater than the measurable 5% performance in these mechanical functions. So if the whole system starts coming into harmony better, all the organs start working better together, the mind starts getting a more positive attitude. And as long as there isn't severe neglect or abuse, it seems to be the foundational step that is needed to procure good health in the human being.